Hi, for those of you guys who don't know me, my name is Rocco. Brogan's having me come in today to talk to you guys about persuasive speaking because she was nice enough to cover one of my classes earlier in the semester. And so now I'm going to cover a class for her and teach you guys about persuasive speaking. So who am I? My name is Tom Rocco Tagliata. Everybody calls me Rocco, so you can address me as Rocco for today. That's fine with me. You see me in the hall, wave, say what up, that's cool. But I coach the public speaking team here at the university, so I don't know if any of you guys were out on campus on either Saturday or Sunday, but we had like a bunch of people running around in suits between ANSPA and Moore and a bunch of places because we hosted the tournament here. And so, you know, if you have any questions after the lecture, feel free to email me or stop by Moore 209. I'd be happy to explain anything in further detail. Dylan, is it recording back there? Okay, cool. That's Dylan. He's one of my fellow GAs. He teaches speech and debate as well, more of the debate portion than the public speaking. But he's also another person you guys can go to if you want to learn about persuasive speaking. There's an attendance sheet going around. Raise your hand if you have not signed the attendance sheet. Okay, cool. So let's just pass it up front. On it, you'll see a space for your persuasive topic. Just fill it out. This is so that Brogan can either, approve or disapprove your persuasive topic. But raise your hand if you are feeling a little bit uncomfortable about the persuasive speech. Is anybody feeling a little bit nervous about it, or not at all? Not at all. Okay, well that's cool. This is the first class I've ever seen where nobody's raised their hand, so way to throw me for a loop. But we'll still be talking about the persuasive speech today. So it's all in chapter 16 of your textbook. But the first thing that I want to talk about is just the goals for the day. And so first, at the end of this lecture, you'll be able to understand the type of claim that you're going to make, then know how to craft a persuasive argument, and finally we're going to talk about a couple of strategies that we can use to persuade. So the first thing you have to understand is that when you're picking your topic for a type of persuasive presentation, you're going to have your topic fall into one of these three categories. Almost anything that you're going to persuade us about is either going to be a question of policy, a question of value, or a question of fact. And so what do these mean? Well, a question of policy is persuading that an existing law should be changed or something in the system needs to be changed. So can somebody give me an example of what a policy persuasion would be? What's something that we could change about the policy of our country? Yeah?
Maybe making college free.
Making college free, so that might be a question of policy, the fact that we have to pay for college. How about like some sort of piece of legislation? Can anybody think of a law that might be controversial that we might want to overturn or get rid of? Or something we might need a law for?
Gay marriage.
Gay marriage. So maybe you want to persuade for, the passing of gay marriage. Or maybe you want to persuade, if you're like a pro-life or pro-choice advocate, you might want to persuade against, the policy set by the case of Roe v. Wade. So when you are looking at a question of policy, these are several examples. So asking what should be done to make a given situation better. Protesters outside an abortion clinic, citizens handing out pamphlets on election day. Policy suggestions need to be real and sincere and based on evidence. So you can't just, make up some policy or claim that, so like let's say you wanted to persuade the class that you should be more careful with your, what you text, because the government might be watching what you text. This wouldn't necessarily be a case of policy, pretty much because unless you have a specific piece of legislation that you're attacking, you cannot consider it a speech of policy. So does anybody have a policy, a question of policy, as their persuasive speech? Raise your hand if you have your persuasive topic. Raise your hand if you don't have your persuasive topic. Okay. So you guys should really start thinking about that. And the reason why is because if you don't have your persuasive topic ahead of time or have enough time to think about it, then the arguments that you're going to make are most likely not going to be as sound as you would like them to be. And we'll talk about choosing a topic in just a second, so hopefully that portion of the lecture will be really relevant to you guys. So next we have questions of value. And questions of value arise when we're trying to persuade the relative merits, good or bad, moral, immoral, of a position. So does anybody have any ideas what this might mean? So what's something that we could look at two sides of the coin for? What's something that's not clear if it's good or bad?
Abortion. Abortion.
Abortion. How about somebody else? So who's heard of Dr. Kevorkian? Anybody?
Oh, the euthanizer guy.
Yeah, can somebody share, just know, what did Dr. Kevorkian do? So euthanize?
He euthanized old people or people that were like dying already before they like had to suffer through it.
Right, so he provided a service. Were these people willing to do it? Yeah. So this guy, Dr. Kevorkian, he got together with all of these patients that were suffering from terminal illness, either cancer or maybe AIDS or some situation where they were most likely going to die. And so they came to this doctor and said, doctor, like, I don't want to prolong this suffering anymore. Could you help me out with that? And Dr. Kevorkian said yes. And he would give them a lethal injection and kill them. Who thinks this is right? Raise your hand. Does anybody think this is not right? So we clearly, this is kind of a moral gray area. This would be a question of value. So one of my students is doing a persuasive speech on physician-assisted suicide. Like, should we allow it? Should we not allow it? She would be doing a question of value because it's not clear. For those of you guys who don't know how the Kevorkian case ended, he was sent to prison. He's in jail for life for murder. So for those of you who thought he did the right thing, do you agree, that he should be in jail for life? What do you guys think about this?
I don't think he would kill somebody if they weren't dying.
Right.
Like if they didn't want to. Since they consented to it and they wanted to, then he would do it.
Yeah, so you're saying he might be justified.
Yeah.
Who else has opinions on this? Yeah.
I don't think, like what she said was he wouldn't do it if they weren't asking for it, so I don't think he should be classified as a murderer.
Right. Okay. Who else? Yeah.
Well, though I think what he did was right, what he did was also still technically murder as far as the law is concerned, so yeah.
So there's kind of a conflict there between, we morally think, if these people are asking to die because they don't want to suffer through months more of cancer or months more of AIDS treatments, they should be allowed to choose that. But at the same time, under the law, it's classified as murder. So what do you guys think about that? Do you guys think that it should be classified as murder or not? Yeah.
If he wouldn't have performed these, then I still feel like a lot of them, if not all of them, would have committed suicide.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Suicide, you won't have anyone get, sent to prison.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody agree? I'm sorry, what was your name?
Derek.
Derek? Does anybody agree with Derek about this? Who thinks that these people would have committed suicide if Dr. Kevorkian didn't help them? Okay.
Because they would have committed suicide, maybe they would have died, but I don't think they would have committed.
They wouldn't have necessarily done it themselves.
No.
So maybe part of the reason they were asking this guy to help them out was because maybe they couldn't for maybe religious purposes or for whatever reason couldn't do it to themselves. So as you can see, these cases of value are cases where it's not really clear one way or the other how we should feel. We could think, he was doing the morally right thing because, if these people truly were asking to die, I don't think we could really make a huge case against him that he was doing a bad thing. But in the eyes of the law, Dr. Kevorkian was. So when we're talking about questions of value, or if you get this on the exam, remember that you want to look at whether it's good or bad, moral, immoral. That's kind of at the heart of a case of value. So it focuses on judging what's right or wrong or good or bad. We just went over that. And there's a high use of pathos or emotional appeal. So when you're giving a speech of value, you want to get people on your side by like, really pulling through this emotion. You want to really make sure that you were able to connect to your audience and kind of make them feel for these people. So like if you were persuading against Dr. Kevorkian, you would want to, try to sympathize with the patient and say like, they were delirious from the treatment, they didn't really know what they wanted. It was just they were overwhelmed by being scared, and we've all been afraid. So you're going to want to try to bring these people in through those examples. And then second, if you're persuading against Dr. Kevorkian, you're going to want to make us feel for Dr. Kevorkian and not necessarily for the patients he killed. So there's a high use of emotional appeal in questions of value, and if this comes up in the examination, the high use of pathos would go with the question of value. And these are just some examples that you can look through on your own time. Again, just please make sure everybody signs that attendance sheet and signs in with their policy topic. All right, and finally, the last one that we have is questions of fact. When someone tries to persuade another person that a fact is true or not, or that something did or did not happen. So did anybody watch that documentary called Mermaids, The Body Found at all? Raise your hand if you did. Okay. So for those of you that don't know, this was a documentary that was released on the Discovery Channel. And it was billed completely like a normal documentary. They do these documentaries on like, is Sasquatch real? Or, is the Loch Ness Monster really out there? And these I guess, producers went and tried to make this documentary to convince people that, mermaids were real and that they had like documented evidence, the way that they billed the show, the way that they, sold the show on like TV advertisements. The entire time you thought this was like an actual documentary about like, yes, it's trying to persuade you that mermaids are real and mermaids exist. For those of you that saw it, like, was anybody else fooled for a while? Because I was. Yeah. What made you guys kind of fooled?
It was convincing.
It was convincing? How was it convincing?
They had like a lot of like coverage, I guess.
Right, so they had like those little snippets with like all of these scientists,
Yeah.
and they made it like a government conspiracy, that it was a cover-up. It was really interesting, so if you guys get a chance, you should watch it. But the whole presentation was constructed like around this fact: are mermaids real? Yes or no? So, for your persuasion, maybe you really think that the Bermuda Triangle is real, and you want to share that with the rest of the class. You would be debating a question of fact, because the Bermuda Triangle is either real or not real. If you did the Loch Ness Monster, it's either real or not real. Does everybody kind of understand that concept around questions of fact? Okay? And so you want to convince the audience that what you're proposing is correct. And here are some examples of that. Your textbook discusses crafting persuasive arguments, and these are the types. You can argument by examples, so you can give examples. So for example, this mermaid example. When these mermaids, the body found, this documentary, it was providing examples of like bones that they had found. It had provided, oh yeah, like this like undersea reef was like clearly damaged by human-like creatures that have fins. And so it would provide you with like little bits of coral, or like maybe like a little bit of bone, a little bit of a tooth. So that would be examples. Argument by analogy. Who remembers from like high school English what an analogy is? Yeah?
Using like or as comparison.
Like or as, so remember the whole ideas of similes or metaphors? Those are analogies. So if I said it's as hot as, I don't know why, the only thing I can think of right now is like Halloween, so I'm just going to say it. But like that thing, like say, oh, it's cold as a witch's teat out there. Has anybody ever heard that phrase, like their grandma saying or something like that? Oh, my grandma says that all the time. My grandma's cool. She's like this little feisty Italian lady. She can cook though, really, really well. But yeah, so argument by analogy is when we say like something is like this. So we could say that who's familiar with the Occupy Wall Street movement and like the 199%? Like, who's heard those phrases in the news recently? 199%. Raise your hand high so I can see if this works. All right, cool. So we all kind of like have this idea that the 99% is like this. It's all of us. Like, none of unless somebody's like super super duper rich, and by that I mean like billions of dollars. In which case, that's awesome for you. Why are you here? But we have this idea of the 99% being, crushed by the 1%. And so if you've looked at the news, or like if you've heard, maybe just snippets as you're sitting like at Buffalo Wild Wings or something like that, and a snippet of the news might say like, people are likening the 99% versus the 1% as slavery. Somebody might say this is as unfair as the slavery system from the 1800s. And so you immediately look at that and you go, those aren't the same things. Like, you can't make those comparisons. They're different. Like, one is economic, the other one is physically forcing somebody to do labor for you. So some people might buy into these arguments and not see that distinction, but others would go, hold on, this is a flawed argument because you are comparing apples and oranges. They don't go together. There's no way that you can draw those comparisons. So when you're argumenting by analogy, you want to make sure that when you're making your comparisons, that it is a fair comparison, and that it is fair, to the rules, regulations, and the situations that you are describing. Argument by definition is rarely done, and an argument by definition is when you're pretty much trying to redefine something. You're trying to make an argument first. So like this year on my team, we have some people doing a speech on what does it mean to be dead. Because right now in the medical community, there are 3 definitions of death that are entirely different. In the legal community, there's an entirely different definition of dead. So technically, if we return to Dr. Kevorkian, he might have, been killing people who weren't necessarily dead by one definition, but dead by another. And so this is going to lead me into just a quick video clip that I hope will spark your interest. Is anybody kind of squeamish? Raise your hand if you're squeamish. Okay, cool. Some of you may have seen this. It's been circulating a bit. So if you're squeamish, just try to listen, look away. But it's a really cool video, and I think it'll launch us into a really nice discussion.
When the phone call came that the heart was available, obviously we had this mad dash to get dressed because it's 1 a.m. in the morning. Obviously you have to think about the donor's family having a tragic event.
Right now, transplanting a human heart is still extremely difficult for 3 reasons. 1, the supply is very limited. Only a very small number of organ donors end up actually donating viable hearts, and not all of those make it into recipients. 2, you can't just swap out a heart. The heart and recipient have to be a good enough match. But the biggest problem is that you only have 6 hours to work with. The longer the heart is outside of the body, the riskier it is to implant that heart. And the reason these problems are such problems are because of this.
Despite all the advances we have made in the past 40 years in modern medicine, we still are dependent on a cooler and a time clock that we are working against. The concept of using a heart on a machine has been an intriguing and fascinating subject.
Most people that see it have a definite emotional reaction. It looks like something you should never see. The organ care system is an integrated system that allows us to keep organs alive, beating and breathing between the donor and the recipient instead of storing them on ice.
Transmedics and the pioneers have been working on this concept for 2 decades.
After the heart is removed from a donor, it's attached to what is called the Organ Care System, or OCS. It's kept warm, it's fed nutrients, it circulates blood, and it's essentially kept alive. Now there's no longer a race against the clock.
OCS allows us to take that variable out of the equation. A good illustration of this issue is the fact that on an annual basis, more than 30 or 40 hearts in Hawaii go unused. Because of the distance, these hearts cannot be transported to the mainland. This technology can potentially afford those hearts to the rest of the country and vice versa. Organ care system technology has the potential to revolutionize the way we practice solid organ transplantation.
Heart in a box is going to replace the old therapy. Nothing to do with ice. Ice is over.
This is clearly the coolest technology that you could ever hope to work for. Everybody in the company is so focused on enabling more patients to receive this gift of transplantation. We're highly motivated to make sure that this is successful.
That should be a happy feeling that the donor didn't completely die. The donor is now alive in me.
So what do you guys think? Reactions to that? What is that? I mean, what do you guys feel about that? Is it strange? Is it cool?
Oh, it's cool. Yeah,
It's
it's
strange.
definitely. Derek.
Derek,
I
sorry.
just have a question. So it showed the 6-hour range and the 12-hour range from Hawaii. Could this device keep it alive indefinitely, potentially, or just for the?
It increases it into 12 hours.
Okay.
So from 6 to 12. But I'm sure you know as it gets more advanced and stuff, you know, we can probably expect that 12-hour lifespan to increase. So who knows? You know, in a couple of years it might be a whole day that this heart is beating outside of this person's body. I guess, so who thought it was cool? Raise your hand. Who thought it was also kind of creepy? Raise your hand. No, nobody thought it was kind of creepy? I did. All right, well, so like, what do you guys think this means for like our definition of death? Like, where does this, like, is the donor dead? Is the donor alive? What do you guys think? There's no wrong answers either. It's just kind of, I think you can make an argument either way.
Their heart is still beating.
It's just not in anything.
It's out of their bodies.
Yeah, I mean, there's.
So was the machine alive?
I don't know, or maybe it's just like the rest of the person is dead and the heart is still living, which means that they're still living. I don't know, but see, it kind of gets, you know, we take like this definition of dead for granted. You know what I mean? Like we think like we know what this is, but then something like this comes along, and all of a sudden, like now, do we have to redefine our definition of dead? So, does anybody want to make the argument that the person is dead? Who could do that?
That the donor is dead?
That the donor is dead.
Well, chances are if their heart is not inside of their body, their brain is probably dead. Not working anymore.
Probably. So like, you know, their brain probably isn't working. That's probably why they harvested the heart in the first place. So we can say that they're dead. But then again, we start getting into that, you know, like, so what makes a person alive? Is it thinking, or is it the actual circulating of blood through your body? You know, because technically, when these hearts go into another donor, you know, it's not a part of that donor. There's nothing genetic about that heart that makes it a part of that donor. It's almost like you took a piece of a car and put it inside another car. And so like, you know, it's clearly an engine from a Honda, but you put the engine from the Honda inside of a Jeep. So is this person still alive? Like, is that Jeep still functioning? No, but parts of that Jeep are still functioning. So it gets a little bit of in a gray area. Does anybody want to make the argument that the donor is still alive in any way, shape, or form? Am I hurting your brains a little bit? That's the point. That was my point. Is that these arguments, by definition, are really hard to grasp because we have to really have a concrete definition to like say, okay, yes, that is the definition right now that we need to change. So you need to make sure that if you're going to argue for a definition, that your entire audience is on the same page as you in terms of the terminology you're using, the language you're using, and this comes down to the way that you craft your arguments. And then there's argument by relationship, which is very similar to argument by analogy. If you want more of a distinction between the two, consult your textbook. Next, we're going to talk about organizing. So, all right, you're thinking, all right, I kind of got this topic that I want to do, but I'm not really sure like how to approach it. So let's back up for just a second. Who's having trouble selecting a topic? Is anybody having trouble selecting any topic? Who hasn't thought about it at all? Okay, who's going to think about it this weekend? Possibly. Well, I'm going to give you guys like a little bit of a cheat sheet and give you a couple areas where you guys can get topics from. So one is called dig.com, digg.com. Does anybody visit Dig? Yeah. They got like articles, I think it refreshes every 4 to 6 hours. And they just list like a whole bunch of interesting stuff about stuff that's going on in the world or new technology that's coming out. So you can use that. Ladies and some gentlemen, Pinterest, you know, you could definitely find persuasive topics on Pinterest. You know, like maybe, I mean, it could be something as simple as, you know, this is the correct way to fold your towel. Like, so you should fold your towels like this in order to minimize bacteria growth, or something like that. I don't really know what you find on Pinterest. I'm not a Pinterest user. Is that what, there's ways to fold towels? I don't know. I know there's recipes and stuff. But yeah, so Pinterest is a good place. If you guys like Pinterest, there's an app kind of similar to it, but it pulls from different sources, and it's called Pulse, P-U-L-S-E. And you can kind of create your own Pulse page, and what this does is it'll scan, so like let's say you're kind of into like economics or following stocks, like you like the stock market, you can like follow certain magazines, or you can follow certain newspapers. So for your persuasive topic, you know, over the next 3 days, you could follow like the New York Times, the LA Times, you could follow Time Magazine, National Geographic, and it'll just give you a whole bunch of articles that are their top hits from that day. So generally, you know, they have something interesting there that could interest you. And then the other, it's tedious for me to comb through. I don't like it. I like Dig better because it has pictures. But Reddit.com, R-E-D-D-I-T. There's not another T, right? It's just one T?
It's one T, yeah.
One T?
One T.
Yeah, and you guys can comb Reddit and find, I mean, people put stuff there all the time that's trending, and, you know, it's constant, right? Like, it's pretty much a constant feed. So if you guys don't go on Reddit, you know, just browse that. But for those of you who haven't already experienced Reddit, you might want to try the other ones first. They're more visual, a little bit less overwhelming than Reddit. But anyway, when you're picking your topic, there are 3 things you want to consider. First and foremost, what you are interested in. If you're not interested in it, it's going to show. If you come up here and try to give a speech on, you know, I could try to give a speech on why you should exercise more. Like, personally, like, I exercise, you know, 1, maybe 2 times a week. I might not be, like, the most passionate person about, like, yes, you should exercise, you should get up and do it. If I'm trying to persuade you, though, that you should join the public speaking team, you know, I'd probably be really animated about that. You know, I could, you know, probably speak really well about that and really animated for the length of my presentation. So that's first and foremost. Consider what you are interested in. If you want to move on to the second thing, so you're like, all right, I'm kind of interested in these 3 things. You want to pick something that you think your audience hasn't already formed an opinion about. So for instance, one of the young ladies in my class wanted to do a speech on why tanning beds, or why you shouldn't use tanning beds and that you should use tanning lotion instead. Who here knows that a tanning bed is bad for you? Who here, you know, doesn't really care and would use it anyway if they tan? Okay. But, you know, we all know that tanning beds are bad for you and that, you know, you shouldn't use a tanning bed. But people are still going to do it. You're not going to change anybody's mind in this class. You're not going to give them information they haven't seen or heard. So pick something that, like, you think your audience may not have a clear opinion about. So, you know, we just kind of did that whole thing on death. That might be a little too difficult for, like, you know, the 7-minute persuasion in this class. But something about that, like, where people are like, oh, I don't know. I don't know what's the right thing. You want to pick something, you know, so if you come up here and try to give a pro-life speech, and most of your class is pro-choice, or you try to give a pro-choice speech, and there are some people that are pro-life, You're not going to change anybody's mind in that class. You're just going to get half the audience going and half the audience going. So you haven't done anything. You haven't persuaded anybody. Yes?
Yeah, because my topic was euthanasia. So you're saying that I shouldn't do that?
Was doing what?
Euthanasia.
Euthanasia for what in specifics?
Persuasive. For basically pro-choice, basically. That person should have a choice to choose between life or death.
So you could form something about that, because as you saw in this class, you know, people were, so like euthanasia, like what we were just talking about with Dr. Kevorkian?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah. One of my students is actually doing that, and I at first was kind of like, I don't know about that one, but I'm going to let her do it. And the reason I'm going to let her do it is because I don't think it's something that we think about or talk enough about in public that people are just like automatically yes or no. Because as you saw when we asked that question in class, you know, who thinks this was right? Everyone kind of like said, yeah, I think it's right, but like wasn't like, yep, it's right, and like raised their hand right away. Everyone was kind of like, yes. So you could persuade people in that fact, so I think that would be a good topic. Does everybody kind of see why you should pick something that you think your audience doesn't really know that much about? Yeah? You guys can just give me nods. It's cool. And then also, you want to consider finally, you know, what your audience is going to be interested in. So pick something that you think you can relate to them through your reason to listen or through your statement of significance. So for example, another topic that is a possibility. One of my students on the public speaking team 2 years ago, raise your hand if you drink the tap water in Mount Pleasant. Raise your hand if you drink your tap water at home. Raise your hand if you don't drink tap water at all, ever. Okay, so how many people we got that don't drink tap water ever? Why don't you guys drink tap water ever?
It's not filtered.
Yeah.
It's not filtered? Okay.
Normally others.
What?
I normally have like bottled water in my house, so.
Okay, so you would just use bottled water?
Yeah.
How about you?
Saying Gatorade because we play a lot of sports.
Okay, so these are some reasons why they choose not to. Those of you who drink tap water, why do you drink tap water? Yeah?
Thirsty.
Thirsty? Why do you guys just think it's okay to drink tap water? Yeah? Convenient. It's right there from the faucet. Who else? Anybody else?
Just heavier regulation on it than water.
Heavier regulation on it than bottled water, which is interesting because that segues me into the persuasion that we did. And so there's tons of regulation on tap water, you know, ways that it has to be treated, unless it comes from a well. You know, if you have a well or like a well on your property, then, you know, there's just certain bacterial levels you have to meet. But if you have like, you know, tap water through the city, there are strict regulations on what they're supposed to do. But did you guys know that every time you drink a glass of tap water, that the legal standard for the amount of arsenic in your tap water, just one glass, is equivalent to receiving over 1,598 x-rays in one glass. That is the legal standard for arsenic in our society with drinking water. So her persuasive topic was that, hey, like we haven't revamped these regulations since 1978. We need to revamp these regulations on tap water and bring them into line with the current knowledge that we have. So, you know, that would be an example of a topic that's like, oh wow, you know, I think only 4 people raised their hand and said they never drink tap water. The rest of the class drinks tap water at some point in their life. So that's a speech that would like really capture people's attention and bring them in. And where do you find topics like this? Those 4 sources I just gave you. So comb them a little bit this weekend, even if it's just like, you know, to take a break from homework, or, you know, you're hungover in your bed and you flip open your laptop and you're just like, I don't know what to search, but I'm going to search something. Search those websites, you know, you'll find some interesting stuff. Anyway, so you got your topic. You got your topic and you're like, all right, I think this is something I'm interested in, it's something other people will be interested in, it's something I could really persuade about. So what can I do next? And the next thing is to come up with a structure for your speech. The most common is problem, cause, solution. What does that mean? So for example, with this tap water speech that I was just discussing, well, we have to convince people that there's a problem because a lot of you, already think that tap water is safe. So we have to establish like what are the problems with our tap water. So we had stuff about the arsenic. We had a story at the beginning of the topic that was from this woman in West Virginia who like pretty much has to throw her kids in the shower and pull them out because their skin burns from the amount of lead and nickel in the water. It has scarred one of her children, like where the water has touched his skin, and they'll instead, bathe in the laundry water because it actually burns less than the real water. So we had to provide and establish that there was a problem that needed to be solved. And so then we're like, okay, well, we now established that there's a problem. You guys would all agree, drinking 150 X-rays worth of arsenic is probably a bad thing, right? Raise your hand if you agree with that. Yeah, I don't want to be drinking rat poison, because that's what arsenic is. So, okay, we've established that there's this problem. So I got to tell you about the causes. And so in order to have something to fix, we have to know where these problems stem from. So you might think the cause, is the tap water itself. But the causes have to go deeper than that, because then you'd just be repetitive. So what are the causes? The causes are that we have poor regulation in regards to tap water that hasn't been updated since 1978. And then the other cause is that we know a lot more now than we did back then. So we know from years of scientific study that arsenic is bad for you. Lead used to be used in paints all over the place. We now know that that's horrible for pregnant women and developing babies and children. It's terrible. So you have to establish the causes in order to tell your audience what to solve. And so we get to the solutions. So how do we solve this? I have to then give you two solutions. And the best way to do this is on a big level and on a small level. So one big solution and one small individual solution. So for the tap water, who can kind of give me an example of what would be a big solution?
Cleaning up in general, just changing everything in general, finding a big solution, not just finding a small solution would just be bottle replacement, just buy bottles and whatnot, and then the bigger one would just be changing the whole thing in general.
Right. So the big thing would be changing the legislation. That would be a big thing. That's a hard thing to change. But the small thing, the individual solution is spend $10, get a Brita filter for your tap water. Those are better at filtering. They will filter out the arsenic. They'll filter out the nickel. Buy bottled water, which is strange because I think CMU's campus is really moving away from bottled water. I think there was actually a big thing where they wanted to remove all of it from campus last year. From all the vending machines. So if you feel passionate about that, maybe you can say no, we need to keep our drinking water and our bottled water at CMU because our tap water is filled with arsenic. So that can be a persuasion that you choose to do. But anyway, the solutions, you want one big, one small, and then you conclude usually by tying back to your intro. The introduction is structured very similarly to the informative speech, and you can find an example of that in your course supplement. So how do we organize the persuasive presentation? Does anybody remember Monroe's motivated sequence? I think we discussed it back in chapter 14 before the last exam where we were organizing your presentation. There was a chapter called that. Does anybody remember? Okay. So Monroe's motivated sequence. Monroe's motivated sequence you want to think of almost as a pyramid. Any question that you get in regards to Monroe's motivated sequence, remember that the answer, so I'm going to write it so you guys have a visual. The answer, oh no, okay, couldn't remember. Equals. So if you want to think of this is my weird brain, so please don't judge me. But the answer, and then I think of a German, how he would say answer. So the answer is Answer. And what do I mean by that? I mean that the answer in the order of Monroe's motivated sequence is action, need, satisfaction, which I'm not going to write all the way out, visualization, which I'm not going to write all the way out, and, oh, did I do that? Attention. I mixed them up. My bad. Attention was first, then need, then satisfaction, then visualization, then action. So in addition to your problem causes solutions format, what we want to do is take our audience through this journey. We want to grab their attention. So in that water speech, the first thing we talked about was this mother with 3 kids who could not bathe her kids because they were in the shower, and it was burning their skin. So that immediately grabs your attention because we all know what it's like to shower, and we all know that it would suck if it burnt our skin and scarred us. I mean, a shower is supposed to be a relaxing time. It's not supposed to be something I'm worried about, lighting on fire. So that really grabs the audience attention. Then there's a need. So elaborate on the need to address the topic. So I think the next organizational structure thing that we had going on, so we told this whole story about this woman and how sad her life was, that her children were burning from the water. And then we said, but this is a bigger issue, and that 48 of all 50 states failed the federal regulations that were already in place. What does this mean? They violated the laws that were in place. So even though we have these laws over tap water and that they are significant, 48 states were already violating and had levels in excess of what was deemed acceptable under the law. And so that really established a need. States aren't holding up their bargain, and so they're putting our health at risk. Satisfaction. Propose a solution to the problem. So you want to demonstrate that, you are going to be happier if you're not drinking 1,500 x-rays with every glass of water that you have. You're going to feel better. You'll have so much more room and time for activities. That was a Step Brothers reference. Come on, I'm looking for laughs here, guys. And so you've got to demonstrate, we are dissatisfied with the status quo. And if we really are able to change this and make our lives better, then we will be happier as a result. Which leads us into visualization. Visualization is just showing the audience what they will gain. So you're like, all right, I've taken you on this journey. I've captured your attention. I've shown you that this is an issue. I've showed you that we need to change it and that you'll be happier if we change it. So now I need you to, as corny as it sounds, it's like being in a yoga class where they're like, visualize yourself as the river. You have to be like, visualize yourself as the change. So you can tell people, all right, yes, we have to change this. You will be happier if you change this. But then you have to show them how they are going to change it. Include them as a part of the change, as a part of your solutions. So in the public speaking team, we always try to open it up by saying, we have 2 solutions. First, on an individual level, we all need, and they use inclusive language, we all need to take active steps in order to reform our legislation. I urge you to go to the National Wildlife Foundation's national website and sign the petition located at nws.org, and use this inclusive language of we in order to bring us all together and visualize taking action. And then finally, asking the audience to act on your proposal, which would be, so go sign that petition, make your voice heard, get out there, get the need out. And you want to motivate the audience to support your claims by connecting their needs or wants to a plan that could satisfy those needs. Dylan, can you turn the camera real quick? So you can almost visualize your persuasion as a pyramid. So you're up here, when you start. And you start building your argument. So you tell this one little isolated story, right? This is that one little isolated story that captures your attention. And so then people are like, okay, yeah, I'm kind of buying into it. So you expand your argument by creating need. So you've kind of demonstrated yeah, here are the problems. This is what's going on. This is why we need to change it. Then you go down to the satisfaction, which is here, and you're expanding your argument even further. Expanding your argument even further to visualization. And so at the end of your speech, your pyramid almost takes a dive in on itself. And so you've been getting broader and broader and broader, building your argument. Now everyone's like, yes, I am with you. It's not an S. But everyone's like, yes, I am with you. And so then you want to give them a very direct action to fulfill the needs of the persuasion. And that's what you want to do, is build this kind of structure with your argument and follow Monroe's motivated sequence. And how do we do this? We provide 5 strategies to persuade, which we will go through very quickly. So first, provide a sufficiency of evidence. Second, ask for suspended judgment. Third, demonstrate the costs and benefits. Then seek out micro changes, and then we'll talk about social judgment theory. So provide sufficiency of evidence. You know, if I just told you that your tap water was bad, and that it was a bad thing, and that it would harm you, you guys would probably laugh and be like, you have no evidence. Like, I drink tap water all the time, I feel fine. You know, like I can bench press 300, like, cool. And then I could say, you know, okay, I gave you the arsenic point. I gave you, you know, this woman whose their skin is burning. I'm giving you direct evidence. So you need to provide, for whatever you choose to persuade, enough evidence to create a need for change. Enough that most people could understand your point of view and consider your position. Ask for suspended judgment. This is something you don't necessarily need to directly do, and like why I'm saying you should pick something that maybe is like a little bit off the beaten path that people don't know about, is it makes this step easier. But if you were to come up here and do some sort of speech, you know, I'm just going to use the abortion debate again because it's something I think we all are familiar with, and do a speech either pro-life or pro-choice, it would be very important for a student to come up here and ask the audience, like, I need you to put your beliefs aside, and I need you to consider the facts I'm going to present today. They may not do it. Like, they may not do it. And so you at least have to acknowledge the audience's strong beliefs or opinions, but at the same time, politely ask them to simply consider the speaker's position on the topic. So, as I just said, the way to do this is you want to say, like, I understand that we all have opinions on this issue. However, today I'm going to simply present to you a list of facts that are backing one portion of the issue. So regardless of your position, please consider my facts, consider my argumentation before your own beliefs. You know, and you want to kind of ask them to put stuff aside. So that's what we mean when we say ask for suspended judgment. Demonstrate cost benefits. This is pretty, you know, self-explanatory. You want to tell them, like, if we don't change, you are going to keep suffering these costs. There's something that's bad that's going to happen to you. You're going to keep drinking arsenic in your water. But if we change and like change the regulations, we will benefit from this change. Seek out micro changes is that we want to ask, if you guys remember the audience analysis, we want to ask for a small amount of change, not a large amount of change. If we do a large amount of change, then it's not going to work because people are just going to go, no, I like where I am, I don't want to move. But if we ask for small amounts of change, you know, it's like, think of a little kid in like a high chair and you want him to pick up his room. You might go, hey, can you pick up my room? And he might, or can you pick up your room? And he might just go, no, I like my room dirty. Like, this is like my spot for the giraffe, and this is my spot for the elephant, and like if you move it, it's all gonna be messed up. But you might say like, hey, but like, you know, you really like to play, I don't know what kids do anymore. You might really like to play football. And so like if you pick up your room, maybe you and your brother could like throw the football around in your room because you won't trip over stuff. And the kid might go, oh yeah, like maybe I'll clean up because then I can play some football. But then like part of the room's still dirty and you're like, oh wait, where is your game of trouble that you really like to play? And you know it's in that pile, the kid will clean up the pile to find the game of trouble. So you ask them for small amounts of change, not, you know, clean your whole room at once, because, you know, if anybody's had their parents come up to their dorm room at school, we all know that no parent is ever going to be satisfied no matter how clean that dorm room is. And they just go, like, you should clean all of this, and you're like, no, this is my life, I'm at college, leave me alone. So maybe if they ask you to just pick up a little bit, or, you know, directed where the problem is really the worst, you might be more inclined to pick up your room. And then finally, social judgment theory. You can, I think Brogan's going to post these slides, so you can read about this on your own. But just know that it's that an individual can be persuaded on a topic by having a person accept changes that are close to their already held beliefs. It's pretty much an explanation as to how we seek out those micro changes and how we present information to move people slowly to our side. Does anybody have any questions in general about the persuasive speech or anything? Going once, going twice. make sure you sign the attendance sheet. Where is that? Okay. And I'll have it up here if you didn't. But thanks for listening today, guys.